I'm Pat McGibbon, Chief Knowledge Officer for AMT, and with me today is Amber Thomas, Vice President of Advocacy, the woman who knows about everything going around in DC that's worth knowing. And we're sitting here at the beginning of September, having had just a wonderful finish to the last session, right? More work done in the last 2 weeks of that session than probably the last year and a half.
It really is incredible, Pat. What has been probably years in the making, two huge bills, Democratic priorities, were signed into law actually during the August recess. One, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a pared down version of the huge budget reconciliation bill. Another is the bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act, which is a great thing to talk about today since we're talking about IMTS.
Exactly. I mean, that CHIPS Plus bill has been out there in one form or another for almost 2 years, and it's finally seeing the dawn of day. Assuming that when the Congress gets around to the appropriations process, that this still makes the cut. But let's go back to those last days in August and that exciting push for the end. What do you think got the ball over the line?
Well, I think the CHIPS portion of the bill actually was the huge impetus for passing this piece of legislation that ended up being a lot more than just CHIPS. But when you talk about the appropriations process, the only direct funding that is in this $280+ billion bill is $52 billion, a little bit more, for the chips industry. A lot of that direct subsidies for companies to start domestic production of semiconductors in the United States.
You can understand why it gets as much support, because whether you own a Ford F-150 or a Tesla, they both run on chips. It doesn't, maybe the gas that makes the engine move and electricity move there, but none of that happens. None of that motion happens. The windows don't even go up without these chips. And finally, we got this program going on. That's wonderful. As we look out past August to where we are now, and they're looking at the really hard part of the business. Even though the reconciliation bill has been done, you've got the appropriations process.
And really, a lot of what is in this CHIPS and Science Act will need to be funded through the appropriations process. That occurs basically right at the end of the fiscal year, every year, and usually as a continuing resolution. So there may be some time before a lot of this science part of the bill gets funded, but it is a hugely significant investment in science and technology. And, a big part of that is focused on advanced technologies and manufacturing.
Yeah, and while it may not get us back to that 42% share of production worldwide in the United States that we had back in the early 90s, it will move us off the 12% we're sitting at now, kind of, well, not dead last, but certainly way down the list of manufacturers of domestic chips. We rely so much on China, Taiwan, the Asian tigers, and with Taiwan, they're going to be a benefactor of this as well, right? That $12 billion factory going into Phoenix, Arizona, from the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturers Corporation, they're going to be a part of getting this as well.
Yes, any company that actually has plans to set up manufacturing operations or to expand existing operations will be able to apply for these subsidies. Another thing worth mentioning, aside from the subsidies, though, is a 25% investment tax credit for those companies that are expanding or building facilities in the U.S. So that should help, a wider swath of the manufacturing industry, correct?
Sure, absolutely. It's not just the automobile industry that has this problem. We've had members of our own industry, the manufacturing technology industry. It's called digital manufacturing for a reason. It works off of chips. And any kind of shortage there is eventually come back and capture us, and it has. We've seen some slowdown in controls being delivered and controls being built, PLCs even being available on a ready basis. But this will help, but it's not going to be immediate. I mean, already you're talking about some delays till the funding gets designed, and then when it's designed, getting out into the government process, probably in a year and a half before that starts seeing the light of day. And then you got to tack on how long it takes a fab plant to be built, which is what, another
couple years.
Three,
right?
yeah, 3 years, I think. Yeah, 3 years. So we were talking about 4.5 years. It's about sometime towards the end of 2027 before we start seeing a significant impact from this really big spin on our consumerism with respect to products that depend on these chips. But I understand that the focus of the bill is the right chips, the ones for defense, the ones that go into automobiles and manufacturing, digital manufacturing components, which is a plus, and maybe keep us on this roll of reshoring more of our production, because we'll have the least risk supply chain for that very critical component.
And a large focus of the bill is not just on the chips, but building domestic capacities in other technology and advanced manufacturing areas.
Yeah.
So, what you'll see on the show floor, additive, robotics, any part of the digital thread, the government is really focused on worldwide leadership in these areas to compete with places like you mentioned, China in particular.
Yes, because as we've seen over the course of the last 6 months, between what's going on in Europe, in the Ukraine and Russia, and the saber rattling over in the Yellow Sea between Taiwan and China, as a manufacturer and a consumer sitting half a world away, you got to wonder, can I really rely on this, and how do I manage that risk of, I want them in my supply chain, but I've got to make sure that I have what I need in a timely basis. And that is take away those political issues. We've got shipping issues around the world. Ships are glomming up in ports around the area, not unable because of labor to get product on or off ships. Shanghai has been a mess from 2 close downs to the reoccurrence of COVID in those areas. But besides the wonderful world of manufacturing technology and the chip process, there are some mundane things that have an impact on us. We've got the tax situation.
Which to many is not mundane, but complicated.
It gets more complicated. The tax book, it's got to be a set of regulations that's at least 3 foot tall, and they keep changing it a bit. The R&D tax credit still there,
yes.
But the way you take the tax credit is changed.
That's correct. Beginning this year, the cost of R&D will be amortized over time rather than depreciated or expensed the first year as they normally are. We tried to push that over the finish line, a retroactive kind of expiration or postponement of the provision. Not successful yet. There's still some time for an end-of-year tax bill. That's one issue we're working on. Another that I really want to bring up, since we're talking about buying and selling manufacturing technology, is the 100% expensing provision. It was enacted as part of the 2017 Tax and Jobs Act, and it begins to sunset next year. So, Pat, it really does have an impact on machine tool orders and other orders for manufacturing technologies. It's an important provision If you can't place the items in service that you buy this year, 80% next year is still a pretty good accelerated rate to take advantage of before this provision winds down, unfortunately, in 2027.
Certainly. So the message is get what you can in place in 2022 because not only will you beat inflation, but you'll get a larger share of that being expensed. Even though you can depreciate the last 20% next year, getting 100% this year would really is an accelerator for a manufacturer. Well, I know there's a lot more going on in Washington, and I know you've got a couple more episodes of sharing with us that's going to occur later on this fall.
Yeah.
I'll wait for that before we get a chance to talk about that because we got to wrap this up. We're at IMTS. We love you.
Find us.